A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
Random House Audio presents Star Wars: Legacy of the Force, Fury by Aaron Allston. Read for you by Marc Thompson.
Above the planet Kashyyyk, aboard the Millennium Falcon.
The Falcon banked over a vision of hell. Directly below was a roiling surface of blacks and yellows, reds and oranges. Eastward, the carpet of fire gave way to doomed forest. The line between the two zones was an irregular and uncertain one, and even at the distance of a couple of kilometers, Han Solo could see individual trees at the border burst into fire, some of them exploding from the heat. Westward, superheated air rose in a column kilometers in diameter, hauling smoke high into the atmosphere, obscuring the afternoon sun. And it was the smoke column that showed the real danger of the maelstrom. As that column rose, it drew in air from all directions, constantly fanning the fire around it, feeding the voracious beast that burned out of control. It had once been an unbroken vista of soaring roshier trees and other foliage. But a few days earlier, the Star Destroyer Anakin Solo, at the order of Jacen Solo, had directed its long-range turbo lasers at the surface of Kashyyyk, concentrating fire to cause square-kilometer patches of forest to catch fire. These strikes were intended to punish the Wookiees for harboring Jedi and for dragging their feet before committing their forces to Jacen's Galactic Alliance. Punish they had. The fires had grown into firestorms, raging out of control ever since. The Falcon kicked as she glided over a thermal updraft. Han brought her back to smooth, level flight. The communications board crackled with Leia's voice. "Sweep complete. I've planted the last beacon." Han sent the disc-shaped freighter into a bank and descent toward their rendezvous point, about 2 kilometers outside the fire zone. The Falcon bucked harder as a particularly ferocious thermal caught her, and then she was out over unburned forest. Han checked the comm board, looking for the signal being transmitted by Leia's last beacon, and homed in on it. "Waru, stand by in the winch." There was an affirmative growl across the intercom. Waru waited at the starboard docking ring, open to Kashyyyk's atmosphere, ready to retrieve Leia. Waru wasn't just any Wookiee. He was Chewbacca's son. A clever son. A good warrior. If things had been very different, if Han's son Jacen had not turned out the way he had, perhaps the Falcon could have been Jacen's someday, with Waru at his side, a continuation of Han's roguish legacy. Instead, Jacen had become something dark, something terrible, a self-appointed leader determined to impose rigid control over the galaxy. He had conspired, tortured, betrayed, murdered, all with a confidence in the rightness of his cause that was the match of any madman's. The communications board beeped to indicate that they were close to the beacon source. Han depressed the bow to give himself a better downward look. He heard a thump from the starboard side, followed by a growl of complaint, and grinned again. "Sorry, no more sudden maneuvers, I promise." The Roshiers were still tall enough here that the forest floor was a deeply gloomy and dangerous place. There was no clearing to set down in. But Leia was visible, her white robe starkly contrasted among all the greenery, standing on an upper branch as if loitering on a Coruscant pedwalk, unconcerned about winds or the potentially pesky force of gravity. She waved. Han positioned the Falcon directly above her. "All right, Waru, bring her up." A moment later, he heard the whirring sound of the winch lowering its line to Leia. The crew of the Millennium Falcon was about to commit an act that, under other circumstances, would have been considered as horrible as Jacen's setting of fires, because the two acts were almost the same. A Confederation cruiser in low planetary orbit would soon fire its turbolaser batteries down at the forests, setting portions of them ablaze. But this strike would be surgical, precisely following the kilometers-long line of beacons Leia had planted. Once that line was drawn, the turbolasers would broaden it toward the east, and the Falcon, other freighters carrying fire-snuffing foam, and Wookiee firefighting teams would control it along its western perimeter. The controlled burn, once extinguished, would leave only char for the advancing wildfire to meet, and that char would be too broad for wind-borne sparks to jump. The fire would end here, and the Falcon and other ships would move on to create fire breaks elsewhere, eventually checking the wildfire everywhere. Finally, its food all consumed, the firestorm, the beast, would die of starvation, leaving behind millions of burned acres and a scarred, smoke-shrouded world. Han heard the winch stop its whir, then moments later resume it, bringing Leia up to him. He set the Falcon into a gentle eastward course, sending it away from the firebreak area, and checked to make sure his communications were still set to the Confederation frequency.
Millennium Falcon to Lilibanca. Beacons are in place. You can begin. At number 1, if you please, not number 20.
He heard a chuckle before the voice of the cruiser's male communications officer replied,
Acknowledged, Falcon, and thanks.
Then there was a new voice, female, pitched low and seductive, from close behind Han.
Your feelings betray you.
Jolted by adrenaline, Han jerked around to look. Standing in the entrance to the cockpit was a woman. She was robed nearly head to foot in dark garments. Only her face showed, and it was a beautiful face, blue-skinned, cheerful of expression. Her name was Alima Rar, and she had come to kill him. Han drew his blaster. As he did, Alima gestured, a flourish that swept her cloak away from her body, and reached out with her left hand as her right snatched her lightsaber from her belt. Han's pistol, barely clearing its holster, flew from his grip and into hers. Han gaped at her. She should not have been able to do that. Her left arm was useless, had been ruined years earlier, but now it was fine. She tisk-tisked at him.
We are Jedi. We choose not to be shot. We have been shot before. It is not pleasant.
She dropped the blaster. It rang as it hit the deck plates. Han put bravado he didn't feel into his voice.
So? What are you gonna do, talk me to death?
We are going to wait until your piranha beetle of a wife can see. And then we will shove our lightsaber through your heart. She can hold your corpse and cry. Won't that be nice?
Not really.
Without taking his gaze off Alima, Han reached forward and disengaged the freighter's inertial compensator and artificial gravity generator. In the same instant, he hit the thrusters and hauled back on the control yoke. He stood the Falcon on her tail and blasted off towards space. With the inertial compensator off, the sudden acceleration crushed him back into his seat. His head swam with unaccustomed dizziness. Alima's expression changed from one of good humor to round-eyed surprise as she fell backward. Han heard her thump against the wall of the cockpit access corridor. She had to have hit where the corridor angled away toward port and stern. He heard his blaster pistol clattering along after her. Then there were more thumps and clatters as Alima and the blaster rolled down the slope the angle wall now constituted. There was also laughter. Peals of Alima's laughter. Waru, his golden-brown fur gleaming orange and red in the glow of fire visible through the docking ring, was just hauling Leia aboard when the Falcon bucked. Her bow suddenly pointed straight toward the smoke-filled sky and accelerated. Waru and Leia were slammed into the aft bulkhead of the corridor just inside the starboard docking ring. Abruptly, the bulkhead was floor, and the acceleration pressed them down like a big invisible hand. Leia unbuckled herself from the winch harness and drew in a breath to shout at Han. Then she heard it, laughter echoing off the Falcon's bulkheads and floor plates. Waru stood. Alima Rar, she's aboard. Leia drew on the Force to augment her physical strength. She stood shakily, took her lightsaber in hand, and ignited it. Let's go. Stiff-legged, she marched the several meters down the boarding ring corridor. She reached the hatchway leading to the freighter's main corridor, the curved passageway that offered access to all the Falcon's compartments. The freight lift was probably where Alima was now, but Leia couldn't be sure of that either. The laughter had ceased, and Leia could not find Alima in the Force. Leia glanced over her shoulder at Waru. Get to the cockpit. That's where Alima is going to end up. Protect Han. Watch out for poison darts. Waru groaned in assent, He moved past Leia, crouched, and leapt across the main corridor.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?